And welcome back to the Prescribing Prosperity Podcast with your hosts, John and Alex Soutsos. Gentlemen, we have a guest who's on the road. This is like a Bob Hope, Bing Crosby travel show today, man.
Well, be careful of the golf balls. That's all I can say.
I like those. I like those references. Bob Hope.
There you go.
A classic.
Like all of one person is going to catch that reference, and that was your dad.
Well,
so I mean,
the older group of us will know what that means.
Hey, I know Bob Hope.
It's a Kid Rock roadshow now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. So without further ado, let's begin the roadshow. Alex, tell us who we're talking to and what's on the agenda today.
Yes, sir. We're going to be talking to Tim Doescher. Tim Doescher is the executive director at Unleash Prosperity. And so we're going to be talking about supply side economics with him today, and the importance and the validity of using supply side economics in order to grow the economy and manage some of the current situations that we're in the United States, as well as its broader application in any economic circumstances. So, Tim, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today.
So good to be here, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. So let's start at the beginning before we go too much further. So where did you begin your career, and how did you get into the Unleash Prosperity space?
I Googled White House internship in 2006. President Bush was in the White House at the time, and I didn't know anybody. I was a kid going to school in the state of Michigan. I'm in the Detroit area. That's where I was born and raised. And sitting in my parents' basement, I Googled White House internship and didn't know a single person, but somehow I got in, and that started the whole thing. And that kind of climbed to different campaigns, the Romney campaign, the Santorum campaign for president. I was in the state of Ohio for a while working for Governor Kasich. I mean, a lot of Canadians probably won't know these people, but they're big deals in American politics. And then finally, I got a call from a friend who was working for a guy named Stephen Moore, who's a supply side economist. And he was at the time writing for the Wall Street Journal. And he said, we need some help managing this guy. He's crazy. He's chaotic. He's going everywhere. He's like, I'm a good researcher, but I have no idea how to make sure things, the trains run on time.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was 2015. And I've been, I was at Heritage for 7.5 years until Steve Moore calls me up and says, hey, this Unleash Prosperity group is getting, bigger, and we're wanting to grow more. What do you want to come over and help us? Again, keep the trains running on time. And so I said, yeah, let's do that. And so I've been here now for 3 years, and, in the fight every single day in Washington, D.C., both on the right and the left, trying to fight for supply side free market capitalism being implemented at the highest levels of government.
Excellent. And that's
Capitalism.
certainly what we need more
That's
of.
a pejorative.
Not free market capitalism. That's the key. Free
Yes.
market capitalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Free
give
is a
our
good
audience, give our audience a bit of a background about what is Unleash Prosperity, and a little bit about some of the work that you guys do.
It started out as a dinner club. So back in 2016, and a lot of this is a lot of U.S. focused politics for the start. So forgive me if or ask me some questions if you don't know who or what I'm talking about, please. But it started in 2015 when you had like 18 Republicans running for president. I mean, and by the way, one of them was a little known guy named Donald J. Trump. He was running for president back then. And
Heard of him?
yeah, these
Did he win?
I think he did okay. He did all right.
When I saw him on the dais back then at the first debate, I thought, what the hell's Trump doing there? That was my instinctive reaction. I was like, is this a joke? Why is he there?
Yeah. Is this an episode of The Apprentice? I mean,
Yeah.
geez, yeah.
What channel
No,
was this?
but he and I was there from the start. We watched it from the start. I was there at CPAC in 2015 when he was walking down the hallway, just himself and his security barreling through this crowd. People were yelling at him, "You're not a king. You're not this. You're not that." And a year and a half later, it was written on the wall. He was the guy. He was going to be the head of the Republican Party, and he was POTUS. He was president. It's crazy.
So let's quickly.
So anyway, all that to say, that was such a detour. But all that to say,
I wanted to dive deeper into it.
yeah. So
Go ahead first.
Basically, Unleash Prosperity was a dinner club. We wanted to meet with every single person running for on the Republican ticket and the Democrat ticket. They just don't want to meet with us, so we invite them, but they don't want to meet. But all those people we wanted to have dinner with and talk to them about their view of the economy, see how they, how their chops are with supply side economics. And so the 4 people that were organizing this, get this, guys: Larry Kudlow, Steve Forbes, Art Laffer, and Stephen Moore. These 4 supply side legends,
giants,
would get these guys together in a restaurant in New York, and they would grill them. They'd go to Grill Town. It was cool. I was able to be at a few of those dinners, and it was pretty fun to see that happen. And so it basically stayed that way, just a way for these guys to talk and educate some of the big thought leaders until COVID hit.
Right.
And that's when Unleash Prosperity really started to ratchet up, because we saw that we're shutting down the economy. I mean, as supply siders, we know there is no life if the economy is shut down. There is no amount of stimulus that the government can make to sustain that. And so Steve Moore, especially, my boss, said, we're going all in. And so they started doing a daily email called the Hotline, which everybody should get, that started pushing back issue by issue, to a couple sentences each item on the narratives. And that thing grew to 100,000 people, and very, very quickly it grew overnight. And that has sort of been Unleash Prosperity, saying we are now players in Washington, D.C. as a policy group, as an influence on the president, on Congress. We regularly meet with President Trump. We regularly meet with Speaker Mike Johnson, with Senate Majority Leader Thune. And, we're all over the media. It's just a really fun ragtag operation that that actually has impact.
Tim, just back up a little bit, because the majority of our listeners don't have a clue what supply side economics means.
Yeah.
And also clarify that in as much as you're involved in politics, you're more of a think tank, correct?
Yeah, we don't like to say that, because think tanks usually operate with some form of bureaucracy. They operate, which is just, it completely defeats the purpose of, so we definitely produce research. You'll find our reports. But really what we are is we try to be narrative setters with solid economic policy guiding that narrative. We want to be, that daily email that I talk about.
Right.
It's a labor of love, but I'll tell you what, if you watch TV here in America, or if you listen to radio here in America, you read news aggregates, the Hotline is helping drive the narrative every single day. It's show prep, as we say, show prep for a lot of the media, because it's easy, digestible. Steve Moore, who's probably the best writer I've ever worked with. I mean, he's amazing. He is able to make it fun, lighthearted, but at the same time, heavy hitting, very, very heavy hitting. And so so it's tailor made for the news cycle that we have in America.
So you're not a think tank. Tell our listeners what exactly supply side economics means.
Well, look, so if you know anything about Dr. Art Laffer, he's the supply side guru, and he and Jude Wininsky and some of the great economists, Lou Lehrman, these guys that were working with Reagan back in the day to form his economic plan, they believed wholeheartedly that a rising tide lifts all boats. And by the way, John F. Kennedy was a supply sider. John F. Kennedy believed that as well. He talked about that at the New York Economic Club back in the 60s, that a rising tide lifts all boats, which led him to lower tax rates. So I'll give you a little definition. I wrote it down because I want to make sure that we have a basis, but then we can flesh it out as it comes. But essentially, supply side, it argues that economic growth comes from making it easier and cheaper for businesses to produce. That's a key word: produce goods and services. And so, with that in mind, when taxes, regulations, and the other barriers are reduced, bureaucracy. That means the firms are going to invest more. they're gonna invest more, they're gonna hire more, and then they're going to expand the output, which increases supply, and that lowers prices and raises overall economic activity. So I think
Okay.
that's probably the best way to set the table for supply side. But of course, that counters with the demand side, and we can talk about supply side first. But
Yeah.
however you want to do it.
Let's before we
Go ahead,
hold on, Dad.
Alexander.
I just wanted to push back or jump back a little bit. So going back into 2015, where you're sitting there and you're seeing the Democrat or the the Republican race for who's going to be the leader of the party in the 2016 election.
Yeah.
And speaking with some of the people that you did, when they were hosting those dinners, how many candidates came across as truly nuanced in supply side economics, and how many came across as people who had a general idea of what they wanted to do but couldn't necessarily articulate it in a thoughtful economic framework?
You'd be surprised. Most back then were well versed in supply side economics. I mean, it really has only been recently that members and people within the Republican Party have been sort of pushing back on supply side economics and saying, hey, maybe there is a bit of truth in more tax credits or more higher tariffs or
Right.
Things like that. So back then it was pretty, but there were only a couple that were a little bit. I don't think we want to go this route.
Right. I'd love to.
Did they drop out of the race early?
Yes, they did. Yeah. And by the way, Trump definitely understands supply side economics 100%.
Right.
Good, because that was going to be where I took it next, but we'll go into that in a second. But just to another thing that I'd like to circle back to later on is the tariff stuff. So we'll just have to put a pin in that, because I do think that is a discussion that warrants further airtime. But so let's speak about Donald Trump. When after you started seeing him perform on the stage in 2015, did you believe that it would reach the levels that it did in terms of him eventually becoming the president and the presidential nominee for the Republican Party?
I had no choice. Steve was all in, and therefore I was all in. And I trust Steve. As I got older, sometimes I'll push back on Steve. Hey, you sure you want to do this? But really, anytime that happens, it's a matter of, is this the kind of narrative we want versus is the actual core there? That core
Right.
definition of supply side is what we always want to keep in mind. We always want to keep that in mind.
Right.
Low taxes, low regulation, focusing on profits and productivity. These are the things that we need to focus on, as the core. But, so all that to say is, yeah, Trump was the guy. And by the way, go to any rally, and I remember it. I was helping some folks in the Ted Cruz campaign very early on. You'd go to rallies, and there may be 100 people there. All the while, Trump's getting 20,000 people. I mean, like to say, oh, he's an outsider, he's not going to get it. It's just the fundamental flaw that I think a lot of people in media and in other countries still don't get to this day about President Trump, is that he is a voice for a majority of the American people.
Absolutely.
He is a voice for them. And to deny that is to only separate yourself and isolate yourself further from those people. And
Right.
that is the reckoning that some have come to, but a lot still haven't.
And obviously there are some people who take umbrage with his mannerisms and his personality, and if that's your bent, then so be it. But so by the sounds
I don't want to talk about what Bill Clinton did in the Oval Office in the 90s, but
No, you can talk. No, we know
but-
exactly what Billy was up to.
But I mean,
I
but to
did
say,
not
but I
have
mean, just
relations
to
with that
clutch
woman.
the pearls, though, to clutch those pearls about
I
Trump, look, we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and there's no question about it, including our presidents, no question about it. But we gotta look and see. I do believe his first year, one of the probably the best first year of any president ever. What he has done, the first year of the second term was incredible. What he was able to accomplish. So, proof is in the pudding, I say.
The accomplishments are not flowing through to the end listener in Canada and in some parts of the U.S. because there's still a disconnect going on if you listen to the media.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the affordability crisis was was started by Keynesian economists. It was started by top-down governance.
To be fair
And-
to John Maynard
Yeah.
Keynes, he did say once the economy recovered, you need to pay back the debt that you incurred, right?
Yeah, but that takes work and effort.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
So-
how many
so-
how many demand side, we'll call them bureaucrats to put it politely, have ever had the incentive to unwind policy that is favorable? And so what ends up happening in reality, it sounds great, theoretically, sure, they
Yeah.
should be unwinding that stimulus, but the reality is there's never sufficient incentive for them to do so because it makes them politically unpopular to unwind it. And so that method is, while you can see some of the framework might have some merit, and the application of it does not make a lot of sense, and the evidence has demonstrated that it has not generated sustainably long-term beneficial outcomes.
One of my passions is to study former communist nations. I go on a trip every year with one of my best friends. We go to a former communist nation every single year, or former communist region every single year. And I got to tell you, the narrative that we learn in America is, communism's bad, and it is. Capitalism is good, and it is. But as Margaret Thatcher said, look, in the beginning, communism, socialism can work in the beginning, but sooner or later, you always run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that right there is why it's not sustainable, and why we cannot, like you said, like Keynes said, you got to pay it back. But Keynes knew better. Keynes knew that he was a theory guy. He wasn't going to be in practice. He knew that politics would always play into that, and shame on him for being so short-sighted in peddling this garbage. Basically, it's garbage.
And you know what? I guess you haven't traveled to Cuba yet, because according to Mamdani's advisors, that's one of the thriving examples of communism in the world.
Well,
But-
yeah. Hey, watch Cuba, by the way. That's going to be interesting. There is so much buzz right now in Washington about what's going to happen in Cuba right now. I see so much potential there. I mean, what an amazing thing.
It was already an incredible economic engine in the 1940s and 50s, and then it got the plug pulled out from it, and we know the rest of it. Tim, I have a question for you. We deal with a lot of medical professionals, and when you speak with medical professionals about medical procedures, they say we follow evidence-based medicine. And so I'm a big fan of evidence and a student of economic history. So let's present to our listening audience some evidence-based facts about supply-side economics and how David Ricardo, John Locke, and all those others explained, or how supply-side economics was responsible for the prosperity that developed in the 19th century that eventually led to the 20th century before FDR got involved and threw a wrench into everything.
What? Okay, so what? Sorry, so what was the question? Sorry about that. I just want to make sure I
the
get it.
question is,
That was more. I mean, you should go on that one. You were setting that up perfectly. What was?
Well, our medical professionals say they believe in evidence-based medicine, and today in politics, the average person doesn't understand that there's evidence behind beliefs. They think, well, we believe that all people should have equality. Okay, that's a wonderful belief, but there's no evidence that is attainable. But on the other side, on the conservative side of the political spectrum, there is evidence that small government, freedom, allows the economy to prosper far more greatly than centrally planned economies like the former Soviet Union, or even for that matter.
Yeah.
We are living in a centrally planned economy in the United States and Canada and Western Europe. And the central planners are doing a really crappy job. But the average person doesn't fully comprehend that. So perhaps you can elaborate how we got that great prosperity in the 19th century.
Well, I think that what it was is we let people be people. Let's just go to that. I mean, that's the heart of rugged individualism. That's the heart of America's rugged individualism. That's a bad word now in America. It's coming back. It's a little more under Trump, but the rugged individual knows best for himself and his family what to do. So keep that in mind, because again, the Keynesian model, that left-wing socialist model, puts that hope in an elected, we hope, elected body of governing, but a lot of times it's a dictatorial body of governing, so or totalitarian body of governing. So keep in mind that the rugged individual knows best for himself, his family, and his business. But one thing that is an example to that, and the reason why America, I think, is one of the most is probably the best case study that you could have with this, is the idea of federalism. And I don't know if you know what federalism is, but we have Washington, D.C., which is our capital. But then we've got these 50 states throughout the United States of America who are basically sovereign. We call them sovereign states. And they all are under the federal government, but they have their own self-governing as well. And we set that up, as called the Federalist model, as a laboratory for policies. We wanted to see what New York is doing compared to what Michigan is doing. Hey, they're doing it this way there. Let's do it here, and we can therefore compete against each other. Are you picking up on a supply-side model here? An inherently supply-side model here is the competitions between states, the freedom to move and conduct business between those states. This is a crucial example, and we're seeing it now. If you guys go to this website that we started called votewithyourfeet.net, we've taken all of the IRS and census data, kind of put it all together, and we are now showing and tracking where not only people are moving, but where their pocketbooks are moving, what it looks like for New York to lose 1.7 million people over the last 10 years. What does that look like for the state in terms of government revenue? What does that look like in terms of businesses moving there and relocating somewhere else? Well, I'll tell you what, it looks like about $2 trillion of wealth that has shifted from what we call blue states. Those are left-wing, liberal, Keynesian states. $2 trillion have shifted to red, supply-side leaning states.
So Tim, just to provide some perspective here, because people hear big numbers like billions and trillions, and for most people, it's incomprehensible what that means exactly. But I think perhaps what will bring this home is what percentage of the population is paying the majority of the taxes to each level of government. And when those people from New York, and we all know New York is a very populous state, and the city is a very populous city, and you say, well, they lost 1.5 million people. Well, so what? They have 25 million. So what's 1.5 million? But explain financially how much of the tax revenue those people are responsible for.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think I'm pulling up the numbers right now because we do this. We do this every now and then. So bear with me here. But I believe the top 5%, I think they pay 40%. No, sorry, the top 1%. The top 1%, I think that's probably over $600,000 a year. Pays 40% of all federal income tax.
Yeah, I think that, from the last time I looked, it was more like 50. They pay more like 50%.
Yeah. Well, it is, but then it gets into the top 5%, and then you're starting to see 60 to 65% of the entire tax burden is paid for by 5% of the population. Yeah. This is not the idea of supply side economics. This is actually counter to that, because what you want with supply side is you want the lowest possible rate, but the broadest base. So low rate, broaden the base. You could still tax high earners more. Of course you can do that. But to go after them with reckless abandon, like socialists want to. Mamdani wants to do a pied-à-terre tax that he's proposing now. California, they're proposing a wealth tax. Washington State, they had no income tax. They literally just passed. Now they're the third highest income tax in the entire country. They are going to be driving people out of that state. People were moving to that state.
Yeah.
And but they continue to double down on this, and they don't realize, hey, we're going to get revenue from this. But what happens when you tax something at 100%?
You get zero revenue.
You get zero. You
Yeah.
get zero. And so that has to be the mindset that government operates on. And like you said, like Kane said, pay back your debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay back what you spent.
Like to put it in some actual applicable numbers for people. So almost 26%, 25.6% of tax filers have an income of $100,000 or more in the United States. They pay 87.4% of all of the federal tax revenue. Let that sink in. Like how disproportionate that is. 25% is paying virtually 9 out of every $10 of revenue that they're collecting at the federal level. Like that is just absurd.
Now with the one big beautiful bill, and to all the left wing people, if you guys have any, by the way, if you do have any left wing viewers, great job, guys. Thank you for watching and listening. If you disagree with everything that we say, it's awesome that you're watching this because it's shows that you have somewhat of an open mind. But the one big beautiful bill, now if you're making $78,000 or less, a family making $78,000 or less, you pay zero federal income tax. I don't want to hear it from the left that this is a tax cut for the rich. In fact, I hope we cut taxes. I want to cut taxes for the rich. I want to cut taxes for everybody. But the fact that we continue, I mean, like, what a country. What a country. You pay no federal income tax.
Repeat that for our Canadian clients and our Canadian listeners.
Yeah.
$78,000 a family income pays,
it's roughly that. Yeah.
Zero in income taxes.
That's right. Yeah, because of the one big beautiful bill. Yep.
Wow.
And so we continue to, shift that burden. We continue to close those loopholes. And by the way, that's another Keynesian, a result of Keynesian economics are these quote unquote tax credits and quote unquote loopholes. When I went into law school and I went into my tax class, you buy the U.S. tax code and it's this thick. You can't even fit it into your backpack because there's special interest group after special interest group who's buying off these left-wing Keynesian politicians saying, yeah, but we'll donate to your campaign. So just give us this little carve out. And that right there is why you want to avoid left wing. It never works out the way you want it to because there's always going to be a selfish person taking for themselves and screwing us in the process of it.
So Tim, in the 19th century, how much income taxes did the average American pay?
Oh my gosh. Well, the income tax really didn't start until the Civil War, at least after the Civil War. And I think it was, because, tariffs were the large base of our economy. That's how we funded our government. By the way, government was a lot leaner back then.
Yeah.
So
income taxes were introduced in 1913.
Yeah. So it was a product of having to repay for the Civil War. And so they put that in there.
Sorry.
Yeah. And it was supposed to be temporary.
Yeah.
But then again, nothing is temporary in Washington, D.C.
Or any government, not just Washington.
Or any government.
So what we're speaking here about the U.S. economy, and we're speaking about the U.S. government, but everything we're saying is applicable to the Canadian government. It's applicable to Western Europe and Asia and everywhere in the world. Wherever there is government, you're getting similar behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think sorry, Tim, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say, I think one thing that to go back to your point about, the opponents of the tax cuts in the big beautiful bill will say, well, you're giving a tax break to the rich, which is obviously, as you already pointed out, not true. But even if it was true, it is a good thing to give tax cuts to the rich because the rich tend to be business owners. They tend to be the largest employers. And so to provide greater tax relief to those people allows them to then spend more money on their businesses, which creates more employment opportunities, which creates more income opportunities for people and grows the economy because they're able to provide more goods and services. And so to provide a stimulative benefit, and it's not even a stimulative benefit, I think maybe that's the wrong way to phrase it, but to provide them with less burden from a financial standpoint in terms of tax burden, you are allowing them to operate more freely, which allows them to grow and allows everybody to prosper, which is the whole fundamental basis of supply side economics.
Yeah, and my mentor from afar, and when I get minutes with him, I cherish every single one of them. Dr. Arthur Laffer. I wrote this down. We were at a talk a couple weeks ago, and I wrote this down, and I wanted to read it to you guys because I think it encapsulates a lot of what we're saying. And this is not verbatim, but I just wanted to synthesize. The more you redistribute income, the less you grow income. Mm-hmm. Perverse incentives for both parties to produce. Labor for worker and hiring for the employer. So the worker isn't going to work if he's given money.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the employer isn't going to hire if money is taken from them. And then he made this as the greatest analogy, and it's kind of funny, but it's actually kind of sad. Why do we tax people on the freeway? We want them to stop speeding.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we tax smoking? We want them to stop smoking. In the same breath, why do we tax people who want income, who earn income?
Right.
That, I mean, so if you want less
Well
of
said.
something, tax
Well
it
said.
more. If you
Yeah.
want less of something, tax it more.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the fundamental of it right there.
And the other thing
that
is-
that speaks to the whole minimum wage argument. You know, people say, "Oh, you need to provide a living wage," but all that happens with minimum wage is you reduce employment because now machines are checking you out instead of a human being checking you out, and not that
Or
that
they-
human
or
being
they
was going to
reduce
support
labor.
a family on that amount of money, but he was going to give them the experience as a first job, so they later on will graduate to a higher paying job. But when you create a minimum wage, that's a tax on labor, and the business owner's going to say, "Okay, fine. I'm not. If you're going to raise my costs, I'm going to put in a machine there. No vacations, nothing."
Or what they do is, there are two other things that they can do. They can either reduce their labor, so they can reduce the number of people that they employ because labor is their most variable cost. Again, reducing your wage. Okay, so you're making more per hour, but if you work less hours, are you really coming out further ahead? No. The other thing that they do is they raise prices and they just pass along that increased cost to the consumer. So the person who is earning, now $15 an hour instead of $12 an hour just saw their cost go up, whatever that is, 25% as well, because that price is going to be passed along to the end consumer, who is still them, and therefore on a net basis, on a real after-tax income basis, they're not any better off than they were before.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both.
Yeah.
They don't hire, they and
they raise costs.
and they raise costs, and that's part of the reason why you see what happened in California when they raised the minimum wage to $20 an hour. I mean, you see why In-N-Out Burger is now locating their headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a $20 minimum wage. And by the way, In-N-Out Burger, great company. They provide an incredible product. You guys will never understand how great In-N-Out Burger is unless you go out west and force yourself to go. It's a wonderful hamburger place owned by great people. And they've just said, we built our livelihood here in California and we've had enough.
Yeah.
We cannot keep employing people. Now, tens of thousands of people have been laid off because of that minimum wage thing in California.
Yeah.
And where are they going? They're going to red states now.
No.
Yeah.
We're actually getting our first location here in Toronto later this year.
Wow.
So excited for that because I've heard
Wow.
I have heard rumors about how great In-N-Out Burger is. So we're looking forward to it coming here, and I'm gonna have to pay it a visit. Now we're running up against the clock. We're gonna have to take a break here momentarily, but before we do that, I do just want to ask you one quick question or get you to talk about one principle, and then we will pick back up on it after the break. And that is to tell us a little bit about what the Laffer curve is. You talked about Arthur Laffer and the work that he's done within the organization. Let's talk a little bit about probably his most famous contribution to economic principles in the Laffer curve, and explain it to our listeners and how it relates to supply side economics.
Is it that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Is that his greatest contribution?
Are you guys going to play that? Are you guys going to play that?
we should insert that little clip before this explanation is done.
Oh my
Anyway, go
gosh,
ahead, Tim.
Bill, ask Alicia if she can do that. Bueller.
You should.
Bill, your
we,
job is to do that. Find the clip and insert it here.
we play it. We play it at everything that Laffer does. We play that clip, and every single time it gets an incredible laugh.
Laughter.
So yeah, Laffer and laughter, yeah, for sure. But okay, so the Laffer curve was a response basically. And by the way, the Laffer curve is nothing new. Dr. Laffer says it's been around for 1,000 years. It's basically just explaining what happens at different levels of taxation versus different levels of revenue. That's kind of explaining the relationship between taxation and revenue to the government. The more you tax, the less revenue you bring in to a certain level. But basically what it came from was Out of and I don't know if you know the history. Can I just tell the history just a little bit? It's
Yeah,
important,
go
I
ahead.
think, to do that. Yeah. So 1978 in America, Gerald Ford is president, and he's got coming up on a deficit, and he said we're going to do a 5% surcharge tax to cover this deficit, to cover the deficit. And his chief of staff at the time, Don Rumsfeld. You guys remember Don Rumsfeld from the Iraq War when he was
Yeah,
Secretary
yeah.
of Defense, but he was actually chief of staff for Gerald Ford.
There are known
in the
knowns and
70s.
unknown knowns.
That's exactly right. Very good. Yeah, yeah. And so Laffer hears about this and just runs to Rumsfeld and says, "I don't think that this is going to do what you think it's going to do. In fact, I think it's going to do the opposite of what you're going to do. I think you're going to lose revenue." And he takes out Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney to lunch, and he draws on a napkin the what you now call the Laffer curve. The normal range, prohibitive range, and the tax rate. If you tax something at 100%, how much revenue do you get? You get zero. And then basically making the case for the ideal tax rate to maximize the amount of revenue that comes into the federal government, and actually convinced Ford not to raise the tax, not to do the tax, but to actually cut the tax in order to get the revenue. Now, we didn't get the tax cut right away. That came under Reagan, but it laid the seed, it laid the groundwork for every single policy discussion in the entire world to take into account that relationship. It's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's straight economics. If you tax something too much, you lose the revenue. But if you tax it at an optimal rate, you're actually going to increase your revenue. We're not saying taxation is bad. We're just saying bad taxation is bad, and for government revenue. So it really did not just say, it took the anarchist and the libertarian argument of screw government, we don't want any government, defund the government. It took that argument, and it actually put some credibility to it by saying, okay, we need government. We need government to function. Certain functions we need government for. But it actually said, but it made the case that you absolutely cannot tax it and raise too much revenue by taxation. It has to be through a combination of taxation, the right rate, and of course the supply side, which is production, thus increasing tax revenue. If you lower taxes, you're going to get more production and more tax revenue. And that's why you saw the Trump tax cuts pay for themselves. We paid for them because we grew the economy so much that business owners paid more taxes, even though they had a lower tax rate.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great place to leave it off. We seeing it.
I love how you gave me the Laffer curve, one of the most intense, economic theories. And hey, we got to go to a break, so everybody's
Do it in 30 seconds. Do it in 30 seconds.
It's fine.
You pulled it off, Tim.
we got lots of leeway here. We can massage things as needed. So it's a great point.
Good.
It's a great part to leave it off because it opens us up for further discussion on the other side of the break, and that's why I wanted to put it there because we discussed it in a previous podcast about the housing crisis here in Canada. Quickly before I throw it back to Bill, we have development taxes that are being put in place by all the municipalities in the Greater Toronto area and across the country, realistically, primarily in Ontario. And what it's done is it has ground real estate development to a halt. And the municipalities don't seem to understand. One of my clients is an economic and real estate advisor for the mayor of Toronto, and she has raised these development charges to unrealistic levels. Like they used to be in the thousands of dollars per home. I'm talking like low, $5,000 per home. They're now in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per home, and the development costs. And he said to her, these rates that you're charging are obscene. She goes, well, we need to support our other social programs. He goes, it doesn't matter. 100% of zero is going to be zero because nobody can afford to build at these rates that you're charging, and therefore you're not going to raise any money. To your point about the 100% of zero, if you tax everybody at 100%, how much tax rate are you going to get? And that's exactly what they're doing, and that's exactly what they're seeing is nobody's building. There is no new development that's occurring right now. and as a result, people are not able to build any new homes, and it's resulting in an affordability crisis here in Canada. But anyway, I will turn that over to you now, Bill, to land us on this episode, and then we'll pick it back up on the other side.
Well, actually, I'm not going to land this episode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tease this episode into part 2, because this is a really great conversation. It's good for a discussion about what's happening in America. It's even better in the context of what's happening to the economy in Canada, which is in sad shape, as a matter of fact. And I suspect that's the reason you got Tim on here. You thought, why don't we bring Tim on? We'll do a little evangelizing about the idea of a free market economy, which is becoming less and less known, unfortunately, in the land to the north. And
we might have to kidnap Tim and bring him up here.
You know, I think
I'll always come up to Canada.
I was going to say, I think Tim would come up to Canada. You know,
I was just there a couple months ago when I was back in Detroit. We went over. Yeah.
See, there he is.
Yeah, but unfortunately,
although do you
Windsor.
guys still claim Windsor? That's what I was wondering. Yeah,
That's
you guys still claim
toilet.
Windsor.
I'm sorry to anybody who's listening in Windsor, but I drove through there for I went to a Detroit Lions Green Bay Packers game 2 years ago, and I'm sad to say that I was more terrified driving through Windsor than I was driving through and walking around downtown Detroit. And I never thought I'd say that.
I gotta say, it's a great view if you sit at Caesars Casino. The bar there, the view of Detroit, it's the best. I mean, you can't get a better view of the skyline. So I will say that is a redeeming quality in Windsor. And we don't get good Indian food in Detroit. They have good Indian food in Windsor, though. So that's worth us.
Oh, well, Tim,
we have it all across Canada.
It's comparative advantage, guys.
Well, you can come to New Jersey too, Tim, because we got great Indian food in New Jersey. So, you know, as a matter of fact, it's great. I got to stop this right now because we got to end this episode. When we come back with part 2 of this, we will be talking about the application of supply side economics in the American economy and what it could possibly mean for the Canadian economy. So don't miss the next episode. The best thing you can do right now is hit the follow button, become a subscriber. When that episode drops, you'll be notified, and you can continue this conversation, which we will do really, really shortly. Alex, John, I know your contact information is in the show notes, so people go down there if you want to reach out to them. Come back for part 2. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of John and Alex and everybody at MedWealth Financial. Thank you for taking the time to listen today, and come back for part 2.
Thank you for listening to Prescribing Prosperity. Visit our website at med-wealth.ca. That's med-wealth.ca for more information or to connect with us for a consultation. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and their guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of ITC Securities Corporation. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investment advice. Always seek the advice of a qualified and licensed financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment or retirement planning. MedWealth Financial Services can provide a private consultation to help you determine the suitability of any guidance discussed on the show.